Welcome to the Com Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizenghausen. April 19th, here are the top stories at this hour. Ukrainian Navy missile units have successfully carried out missile strikes on the important Russian Atlant Aero plant. That's in Taganrog. This plant handles the full cycle from design and production to testing of Molnia-type strike and reconnaissance drones, and they also produce components for that massive Russian Orion drone. Well, judging by the photos, the strikes hit their mark, and this time it wasn't drones, but our own domestically produced Neptune cruise missiles. Neptune missiles are much more serious than drones. They have a warhead ranging from 150 to 350 kilograms for this model that hit the Russian plant. So it's not just Ukrainian drones, but Ukrainian missiles now striking the territory of the Russian Federation. But that's not all. Now our drones have paid a visit to the Yeysk seaport. It's a small but important port on the Sea of Azov. Every year, between 3 and 4.5 million tons of cargo pass through it, mainly grain, coal, petroleum products, and metals. It's located right next to Taganrog, about 60 kilometers away. But this port is exactly where some of the stolen Ukrainian grain from occupied territories goes through. Remember how Putin chuckled, saying the Sea of Azov is now Russia's internal sea? Isn't that what he said? Well, the Sea of Azov is now an internal sea for Ukrainian drones and missiles. Remember that, you Botoxed centipede, forever. And some good news for long-suffering Odessa. For the first time ever, a Russian Shahed was downed by an interceptor drone launched from an unmanned surface platform. This is simply unique. This was reported by the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Brovdy, call sign Magyar. This was achieved by the Unmanned Surface Systems Division as part of the 412th Nemesis Brigade of the Unmanned Systems Forces. So imagine an unmanned surface platform goes out to sea, and from the open water, interceptor drones take off from this platform and shoot down Russian Shaheds. It's just amazing. This is a completely new level. Let's watch the video of how it happened. Very cool. The test was successful. The Shahed was shot down, so they'll scale it up. I really hope that soon we'll be able to build a kind of drone wall, but from the sea, to protect Odessa. Odessa, where I spent part of my childhood. By the way, I'd like to take this chance to send a big hello to Odessa and its people. Sending you a big hug. Stay strong. In every episode, we have an important fundraiser for the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Today, we're starting a fundraiser for the soldiers of the 1030th Anti-Aircraft Missile and Artillery Regiment, AQUILA, raising money for a pickup truck. This is an air defense unit of the legendary 3rd Army Corps. They're fighting in the Kharkiv direction, and the soldiers have recorded a video message for you. Please, have a listen.
Усім вітання! Ми бійці 1030-го зенітного ракетно-артилерійського полку «АКВІЛА», підрозділу ППО 3-го армійського корпусу, відкриваємо збір разом із читачами каналу Бориса Тізенгаузена на пікап для виконання бойових завдань на Харківському напрямку. Кожного дня ми знищуємо ворога в небі і не даємо йому дістатися до мирних міст. Наша ціль – 500 тисяч гривень. Допоможіть нам, а ми допоможемо наблизити перемогу. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Wow, the fighters at AQUILA. Yeah, I really got a boost of energy from that. Let's help our warriors. The link to the fundraiser is in the description. There's Mono, Private, and PayPal for those helping from abroad. In every episode, I say a huge thank you for helping Ukraine and our warriors. If you're watching on another channel, the QR code in the corner also leads to the fundraiser. And I also pass on gratitude from the fighters of the 225th Separate Assault Regiment. I met them recently, they gave me a patch, and it now holds a place of honor on our Wall of Fame. Here is the patch. I'm attaching it right here. Thank you so much from all the units that you've helped. You really are just incredible. Recently, I found a very interesting piece where Philip Spayson O'Brien, a professor at St. Andrews, analyzes a sharp turn in Ukraine's position toward the US. Well, I'd say not toward the US, but toward the administration of Donald Trump. The professor says Kyiv has effectively stopped viewing Washington as a reliable ally due to Donald Trump's policies, and Kyiv is increasingly refocusing on Europe and its own resources. So Ukraine has certainly managed to adapt to the new conditions of war and even seize the initiative. And all this, mind you, is with a very, very small amount of aid from the US, meaning for the most part it's the previous packages being used. There are several key points in this piece, and I think they hit the mark and show what's happening. For a long time, Ukraine's leaders tried to please Donald Trump, fulfilling his demands and signing rare earth deals. While a red carpet was rolled out for Putin in Anchorage and Zelensky was publicly lectured in the Oval Office, however, now Kyiv seems to have given up hope of relying entirely on the US. Ukraine is actively seeking new diplomatic and military partners. For example, as Ukraine shares its hard-won drone warfare experience, we gain partners like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and new contracts with Germany. At the same time, the quantity and quality of strikes deep into the Russian Federation have noticeably increased. I think many people have noticed this. Russian ports were the first to feel the impact. So essentially, to put it bluntly, Ukraine no longer views the US as a key partner, however sensational that sounds. This is happening as European leaders realize that the US might just get up and leave tomorrow. In fact, it's Ukraine that's now raising the issue of a new European security architecture amid a possible US withdrawal from NATO. Ukraine is proposing a new format based on the capabilities of countries like Norway, Great Britain, Turkey, and of course Ukraine itself with its vast experience. So, the pressure on us from the US to give in to Putin, to give him the entire Donbass, raises another very uncomfortable question. What if Putin invades the Baltic states tomorrow and demands to keep part of the occupied territories? Will they also demand we give in to him? Or, for example, if Putin wants to seize the Suwalki Gap? He's been dreaming of that for a long time. Vice President Vance recently said, "Oh, what's the big deal with Ukraine? All this fuss over just a few kilometers." So, if Putin takes the Suwalki Gap, will the rhetoric be the same? Oh, it's just a few kilometers. My God, just let Putin have them. Will that be the same kind of rhetoric? The shift in Ukraine's public stance is also happening against the backdrop of the failed Russian spring offensive and a significant increase, an increase in both quantity and certainly quality of strikes deep into the Russian Federation. I mean, Trump claimed last year that Ukraine had no cards to play. Well, the ability of Ukrainians to adapt even without American aid has proven to be simply astounding. Today, Ukraine is one of the world leaders in drone development and production and plans to produce up to 7 million military drones this year. So they're ramping up production volumes as well. So to use Donald Trump's language, Ukraine does have cards after all, but this time they weren't dealt in Washington. Obviously, we'd prefer to see the US on our side as a reliable ally and partner, and certainly not on Russia's side, and definitely not as a state that lifts sanctions on Putin and his oil during a war. But today, Ukrainians no longer believe that the loss of American support will inevitably lead to defeat. I mean, at one time, losing the United States as a main ally could have meant a total catastrophe for Ukraine, but now, apparently, it doesn't. Those are the key points of this piece. I don't know if they resonate with you or not. Whether you agree or not, be sure to let me know in the comments. And of course, a reminder, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're already at 503,000 on the main channel, and you can join right now. We're here fighting Putin's propaganda, even though Putin and his vassals spend massive amounts of money on their pro-Russian propaganda. So please subscribe. Meanwhile, in Russia today, it's the day of remembrance for the victims of the genocide of the Soviet people. When I read it, I thought, wow, April 19th. Are they really going to tear down Stalin's monuments? So, to make sure no one tears down Stalin's monuments, by the way, I'll remind you, new monuments to Stalin were recently erected in Russia to ensure no one says that the main initiator of the genocide of the Soviet people was, well, Stalin himself. They introduced a significant amendment to the laws. So, you know what the day they have today is called? The Day of Remembrance for the victims of the genocide of the Soviet people, committed by the Nazis and their accomplices in the period from 1941 to 1945. So that's how they've limited it with these boundaries. And the fact that Stalin, by various estimates, destroyed up to 30 million Soviet citizens with his repressions, that's no big deal. Let's put up more monuments to Stalin in Russia. Meanwhile, yesterday in Tomsk, memorials to the victims of political repressions were dismantled. This is just another episode and an attempt in Putin's Russia to just stupidly rewrite history. Actually, it's much more serious than that. I mean, there's a whole sequence of events. In Moscow, the Gulag Museum was recently destroyed, and the Perm 36 Museum was also destroyed. This is an independent museum in memory of camp prisoners. So it was effectively just destroyed. The Sakharov Center in Moscow has been liquidated. People who dealt with NKVD archives, lists of those shot, and the topic of the Gulag are regularly declared foreign agents now in Russia. And finally, they liquidated the memorial organization. I mean, for decades, the organization collected archives on repressions, names of those shot, data on the Gulag, and protected political prisoners. They liquidated it, they declared this organization memorial, they declared the organization extremist. Can you imagine? Parallel to this, of course, there's an opposite process. Monuments to Stalin are being erected again in Russia. If you look even broader, the topic of repressions is disappearing from school textbooks as well. I mean, there wasn't much of it there to begin with. But Medinsky's new unified textbook of 2023 effectively rehabilitates the Stalinist period as a time of mobilization and victories. Does that remind you of anything? The topic of repressions there is literally compressed into a few paragraphs, without names, without scale, without evaluation. And another process is happening in parallel. The FSB is classifying archives. After 91, part of the NKVD archives was opened. Since 2010, the reverse process has been underway. Cases are being classified again, and in 2023 and 2024, this process has sharply accelerated. And those who used to get access to these archives are now being refused. I think everyone understands perfectly well why this is happening. Putin's system is reproducing the exact same mechanics. He mimics his idol Stalin in almost everything. Political persecution, foreign agents, the law on army discredit, meaning enemies of the people, informants. And naturally, in Russia, Stalin's image is being revived once again. What an effective manager he was. Putin is simply showing that you can and should rule through terror, start senseless wars, just as Stalin did against Finland, sacrifice millions of Russians, and still go down in history as an effective manager. It was necessary, it was essential. Essential for whom? Necessary for whom? The main thing is to purge history and claim that, well, it was the only way, there was no other choice. And so that no one remembers how many millions were crushed in the gears of Stalinist repressions. They're erasing it, classifying it, removing it from textbooks. And soon they'll probably erase the numbers of Putin's repressions as well. But we all know how this story always ends. And another story about absolutely unhinged neighbors who just won't crawl back to their swamp and mind their own business. Besides Belarus, the Russians have started preparing for provocations from unrecognized Transnistria. This is the information coming in. This is according to Kyrylo Budanov, former head of military intelligence, now head of the president's office. I'll quote, "The situation is becoming more acute. Hostilities could also begin from Transnistria. There is intelligence that the Russian command is planning to ramp up its activities there. The Russian troops are likely afraid, not even for their own contingent. There are between 1,000 and 2,000 Russians there. I think they're worried about the fate of the warehouse, a massive warehouse of Soviet weapons located in unrecognized Transnistria. And anyway, after losing Hungary, Orban's defeat, after the fall of a whole series of Putin's allies, unrecognized Transnistria as a lever of pressure on Europe is what remains." The warehouse in the settlement of Kobasna, or Kolbasna as some call it, I'm not sure which is correct. By the way, if you're from Moldova, let me know, because it's one way on some maps and different on others. It's one of the largest in Europe. According to various estimates, between 20,000 and 40,000 tons of Soviet ammunition are stored there. Most of this ammunition consists of what was brought out of the former GDR, Czechoslovakia, and other European countries. First of all, it's a good question. Why keep such a huge warehouse there? For what purpose? Another important point, some of the ammunition there is already, well, essentially unusable, but it still poses a threat. I mean, imagine the volume is roughly 2,500 rail cars. If a detonation or sabotage occurs, God forbid, then the explosion could be comparable in scale to a nuclear bomb with a yield of about 10 kilotons. It's roughly the same as the one dropped on Hiroshima in August of 45. That is, that one was about 13 kilotons. Can you imagine what that could be? And this settlement where this giant warehouse is located is right next to the border with Ukraine. So unrecognized Transnistria is more probably from the standpoint of political pressure on Europe. It's what Putin needs. Moldova is not a member of the European Union or NATO. It's a bomb that Moscow has kept for 30 years right next to both Moldova and Ukraine. Objectively, Lukashenko is too cowardly to start any real aggressive campaign against Poland, Lithuania, or Latvia. And Putin is used to doing everything through proxies. First he has some little green men, then militias from Donbas. Later everyone finds out, though they knew right away, that these are regular Russian military. But pumping up unrecognized Transnistria, shifting the focus from the lost war in Ukraine, that could be the Russians' scenario. And I'll also remind you, the authorities of unrecognized Transnistria in 2024 officially asked Moscow for help. But back then, no one provided any help. They didn't then, but there were attempts. After the war with Ukraine, how will the Russian Federation act? Who knows? From the evening of April 18th, the Strait of Hormuz will be closed until the US blockade is lifted. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced this. I honestly don't know anymore if it's open or closed. Due to this warning, no vessels should pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, and yesterday, I'll remind you, IRGC boats fired on a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. Several vessels reported an attack, so as of now, no one has unblocked anything. Iran, of course, is trying to show that everything is under control, but in blocking the strait, and primarily in blocking Iranian ports, there is also a key vulnerability for the Ayatollah regime. 20% of world maritime trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz, but for Iran itself, the dependence is even more critical. That is, more than 90% of Iranian oil and foreign trade passes right through the strait. So world trade will somehow endure, but Iran likely won't. Iran has no alternative routes, so even a partial closure of the sea route will sharply reduce oil exports and, crucially, food. So the food sector is particularly vulnerable there. Iran is the largest importer of grain in the region, and all supplies go right through Hormuz. And another important point, Iran lacks oil storage and refining capacity. So if oil and petroleum products aren't being exported, where do you put them? Nowhere. They'll have to cap the wells, and that risks damaging the fields. And mothballing is very expensive, so Iran could have some serious problems. Basically, it's a game of who blinks first. The United States announced today that they will seize Iran-linked oil tankers and merchant ships. The Wall Street Journal is reporting this. So the US blocks Iranian ports and Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz. Who will give in first? What do you think? Write it in the comments. I'm interested in your opinion. And here's a news item I specifically included in today's episode to show the scale of a certain topic. Egypt's Talat Mustafa Group has unveiled a plan to build a new city costing $27 billion. This city will be built near Cairo. Bloomberg is reporting on it. I mean, it's just a futuristic project. An area of 2 million square meters, 165 residential, business, and commercial towers will be built. It's expected to create over 155,000 jobs and attract tens of millions of visitors annually. I included this news for a reason, because the cost of this city, 155,000 jobs, tens of millions of tourists, the cost of this city is comparable to, it's even less than what Putin spends a month on the war with Ukraine, meaning he could have built a new state-of-the-art city in Russia every month, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. But no, he decided to invest in murder, decided to spend on killing his own Russians as well. So, in my opinion, considering he's already ruined 1.5 million Russians in this war, it's the most expensive disposal of Russians in history, and with their own money and taxes. And they hang up portraits of him. Amazing. Well, you take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to the channel, don't forget, and I'm asking you, please, let's help the soldiers of the Air Defense Unit of the legendary 3rd Army Corps, the AQUILA soldiers. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and glory to Ukraine.